Hi, welcome. If you're here listening to me right now, it is perhaps because the title caught your attention. And I know making assumptions is not a great way to start a conversation, but I am going to take a risk and assume that you're here because the climate crisis is in some way important to you. So if there is one thing that I'm going to ask from you, is to take advantage of this time to understand one of the biggest threats to our future, the emergency in the Amazon rainforest. Allow me to start off by giving some basic facts about the Amazon. It is the largest extension of rainforest in the world, with 6 million kilometers squared spread throughout 9 countries in South America. The Amazon is home to 35 million people living inside the Amazon and local communities. One out of every 10 known species lives in the Amazon rainforest. This includes plants, insects, and animals. 400 indigenous tribes inhabit the Amazon, of which 70 are estimated to be uncontacted, which means they remain inside the rainforest living by their traditions, not knowing, as the name said, or not having any contact with the modern world. And around the world, there are around 100 of these approximately, and the Amazon is home to 70. Lastly, the Amazon is still a carbon sinker, which means it absorbs more CO2 than it emits. However, it is yet to be seen if the fate of the Amazon changes. Now, I am sure you've seen images like this, and in the worst case scenario, like this. But also like this, probably like this, and like this. Whichever way you've seen it, it's not a secret that the Amazon is in danger, which is why my objective with this presentation is to interpret deforestation in the Amazon to understand the politics, social, and environmental consequences on indigenous communities, and also us, because the whole world depends on the stability of the Amazon rainforest. It is a natural patrimony, and we are running out of time to save it. So, what is happening in the Amazon rainforest? Let's start with some history. Deforestation began in the 1970s when Brazil saw the opportunity to grow their economy through the natural resources found inside the rainforest, which led to the construction of a highway that would go through it and was actually never finished. But it gave way to deforestation because anyone really, farmers, entrepreneurs, businessmen, a normal citizen like you and me could go there, chop some trees, and decide that would be our territory because there was no ownership yet, although it would be given later. But uh, deforestation increased too rapidly. It was until 2003, with the government of Lula da Silva, that the now ex-senator Marina Silva started initiatives to protect the Amazon by reducing the percentage of owned land that could be deforested, meaning that if a farmer had 100 square meters of land, he could only deforest 40% of it, let's say. And they also established protected areas that would be left untouched and protected by the army. However, in 2018, Bolsonaro, who is Brazil's current president, took office, and new licenses for deforestation were given to farmers so they could chop or burn their lands in a greater amount. So deforestation increased significantly, and also illegal deforestation was not only left unpunished, but not so secretly encouraged. Lastly, one of the most recent threats is the Brazil US multi-billion dollar investment, in which the US would give billions of dollars to Brazil every year to stop deforestation. Nevertheless, in the past, Bolsonaro has not honored some of the commitments and agreements he's made, especially regarding environmental protection, which is why communities are warning Biden not to make a deal with him, because there is really no guarantee that he will use the money in favor of the Amazon. He will just say what is convenient to him when it is convenient, and whatever comes next could accelerate climate change, and we have no time. So, the first and main cause of deforestation is agriculture and cattle raising by burning the land or chopping the trees. Well, in 20 years, meat consumption increased by 58%, which means there is greater demand, and with greater demand comes greater need of resources like water and food in bigger proportion and less time. And we're talking about cows, one of the most polluting livestock in the world due to their CO2 and methane emissions. So, just to put a little bit of context here, one cow of 360 to 630 kilograms consumes from 27 to 55 liters per day. So, what was the great solution? Soy. soy thought as animal feed to feed livestock to the point that it has become Brazil's main product for exportation because countries like China, the US, and European countries keep their plantations inside the Amazon to then send them to their cattle on the other side of the world. And additionally, other plantations like palm oil used as a conservative in cosmetics and food is the quickest growing plantation inside the rainforest. They are already destroying the Indonesian rainforest, and now they are coming for the Amazon. And just a fun fact, Brazil is, along with the US, the greatest beef exporter in the world. Now, another cause of deforestation are mines found in 15% of the rainforest. And let me tell you, protected areas are not protected. More than 800 mining concessions are here in the protected areas. The main extractions are petroleum and gas and minerals. This pollutes soil and dries the land, not to mention the consequences it has once refined, which results in even more greenhouse gases and greater global warming and greater climate change. And also mineral mining, especially gold, because in order to clean the gold, they use a special mining technique called river mining, in which they clean the gold from the dirt with mercury. So this pollutes the water, the fishes, the air, affects the communities, and basically everyone who depends on water. So here are some of the consequences. As I said before, just in the protected areas, 439 million hectares are at risk. Indigenous territory is also at risk, more than 37% of it. Also because indigenous people depend on the resources that are being polluted. And as I said before, water pollution, because it eventually uh, puts at risk everyone who depends on it, plants, animals, communities, and the whole water cycle is at risk. Also, dams are a problem to deforestation because they are built for the production of hydroelectric energy, but they alter natural cycles and put at risk migratory species. The problem with dams is that they transform the environment for animals and indigenous communities because they change the flow of the Amazon rivers, and this is why species like dolphins, fish, and many others are endangered. And well, of course, everyone inside the Amazon, indigenous people, local communities, they are already used to a way of living that is at birth, but they have patterns. And if these patterns are affected, then their survival becomes more difficult. There is shortage of water, shortage of food, and they the natural cycles are altered in such a way that they have to find other places to live. Lastly, highways and roads. There are already thousands of kilometers going through the rainforest, which threaten animals and invade their territory. Not to mention that these actions were the ones that began deforestation in the first place. Now, some of the consequences beyond the rainforest, which are a danger to the population, to the infrastructure, to the animal and plant population, well, you know what I mean, is the loss of fertile soil, the danger to the communities near the Amazon, alterations on the world's water cycle, decrease on animal population and plants, and the endanger of migrant animals. Also due to petroleum leakings, loss of water, the, and to the greater threat before natural disasters. And we are running out of time. Up until now, 20% of the Amazon has been deforested, which is almost 1 million kilometers squared, and it has had a warming of 1 degree Celsius in the last 60 years. Now, the 2015 Paris Climate Agreement pretends to limit the global temperature increase 2 degrees in this century, even when it should be ideal to limit it by 1.5 degrees. They're expecting to limit it by 2 degrees this century. However, models suggest that by the year 2050, which is just half of the time they pretend to limit the temperature, the Amazon will experience a temperature rise by 2 to 3 degrees Celsius in just 30 years from now. So it could eventually become a savanna. But what has Bolsonaro done? Well, from his first day in office, he reassigned the responsibility of the FUNAI, which is the National Foundation of the Indian, to the Ministry of Agriculture, which protects the company's interests on access to protected indigenous territory. And right now, protected areas are above 50%, but legislations are just too weak. And there is very small interest shown on the protection of the rainforest, which puts these zones at risk, all due to economic growth, which is valued more over life. It's the same idea that we can eat money, but we can't. And it's really sad because people who less contribute to deforestation and climate change in general are the ones who suffer the consequences the most. So, what are some of the consequences on indigenous communities? Well, the area of a football pitch is being destroyed every minute. This implies a danger to their culture, their safety, and their survival. Indigenous communities have different basic needs than we do, and that doesn't mean they're less, but they are not always met due to deforestation. They live thanks to the rainforest, but they also give back to it. As long as it is healthy and safe, they can survive from it. And what we've done to them as a society is just shameful. We've only done harm. But we're also the ones that can make this change. We have the power, and now it's our decision to make it. So let's analyze the difficulties. First and above all is survival. Indigenous communities live from recollection, fishing, and hunting, basically. But when there are no resources, when animals are dying, are polluted, when there is not a habitat for them anymore, then there are no safe sources, which leads to malnutrition and even alcoholism problems, which often lead to poverty. Also, disease, because without contact, they don't develop the same antibodies as in development centers from which invaders come, um, which puts them at a greater vulnerability against common diseases like flu or a cold, and it could be deadly for them. And as you can imagine, with COVID, it has worsened so much. Actually, 70% of human diseases are caused by the destruction of nature, so get ready for even greater diseases. The next one is displacement, because, as I said, without stability, they have they have to move to other places to adapt because there is too much pollution, too much noise from constructions, and there is not any safe sources anymore. As I said, there is no drinkable water. They have to look for a new home, but that is very difficult when there is less safety everywhere. And lastly, violence, because the murders and brutality against indigenous people has increased so much in the past years. And invaders are violently killing indigenous people for territory. They do have a unfair advantage because, of course, they have other weapons like guns. On the contrary, indigenous people have bows, arrows, and whatever they can make with their hands. So they have taken measures now to protect their territory, but at what cost? At the cost of their lives. There is an institutionalized genocide. There is a license to kill. Even more when crimes are left unpunished, and the country's highest authority says now that he won't emaciate the grounds anymore, that he wants to exploit them. A speech that favors the opposition to indigenous villages. The invaders feel legitimized by the president. This was said by Sonia Oaxacara, who is the coordinator of articulation of indigenous villages, just after the murder of Paulo Paulino, who was doing patrol when he got shot. We have the right to be there, in our home. Activists and indigenous protectors are fighting for their reivindication to live in their home without being threatened in any way. Now let's see the fight. And I want to stop at the year of 2017 because up until 2019, it broke the record in Latin America for the most murders of environmental activists with a total of 207. Brazil being in first place, followed by Colombia and then Mexico. And despite representing only 5% of the world's population, one fourth of the murders were indigenous peoples, and invasions are becoming increasingly common. So, of course, patrols to defend their territory are becoming necessary. But the institutions and the people who are supposed to protect the people are actually doing the opposites, as with the case of Ari Uru Wow, who was murdered in April of 2020. Police tried to attribute his death to a traffic accident. They had to rectify later because there was just too much proof and indignation was too strong. But not all cases are like this. Almost not one. So it's really sad that they have to live through this and no one is responding, which is why protests are becoming necessary, an obligation. But can we move the clock back? But what does it mean to move back the clock? To decrease deforestation or to stop it? Well, of course, it would mean to stop deforestation and to reforest the areas that could be deforested, to try to save the rainforest. But it's not really like we have the power. We can't go there and destroy their killing machines, sadly. So it is up to us to demand from bigger companies and governments who can do something about it and who can put pressure on the government of Brazil to stop deforestation. Because, in my opinion, until a change of government happens, then nothing is going to change. So we must raise awareness about this topic if we want to have the chance to move back the clock. But what do we do if we can't go to Brazil, chain ourselves to a tree, and stop the tree from being chopped down? Although every single one of the trees around would be cut down. Well, you can become an activist. You can eat less meat, reuse paper, consume less, eat less Nutella. I don't know. There's creativity everywhere. Because you should never doubt that your actions have an impact in other people. Even if it's just one person from the hundred you know, it will be worth it because it will change their lives and we can change others. It's a chain of change. And I believe that the strongest actions are the ones that are done honestly and selflessly. And we should all become change ambassadors for our communities and, lastly, the world. But now, you're a global citizen. You can change the world. But we can't have hope without action as much as we can't act without having hope. So, to save a future that is in danger, we must fight now because we're running out of time. All day, every day. And let me tell you, our silence will not protect us. Thank you.